The city was an oven, and Alex Tran was roasting in it. The midday sun beat down on the asphalt of Saigon, turning the air into a shimmering, visible haze. Sweat trickled down his temples, stinging his eyes and soaking the collar of his worn-out polo shirt a cheap, faded gray that did little to repel the heat. His knuckles were white as he gripped the handlebars of his Honda Wave, the engine a familiar, sputtering thrum beneath him. Strapped to the back seat was a large, insulated box, its bright orange color a stark contrast to the grime of the city streets. Inside, a well-to-do family's lunch was slowly losing its warmth. He navigated the chaotic symphony of traffic with a practiced, almost unconscious grace. Horns blared, a ceaseless, cacophonous chorus. Motorbikes, packed with families of 4, swarmed around him like metallic fish. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes, street food, and the faint, sweet scent of rain that threatened but never came. This was his office, his world a sprawling, 20-million-person maze of concrete and steel, and he knew its arteries and capillaries better than the lines on his own hand. Every delivery was a race against time. The app on his cheap, cracked screen phone was a merciless god, its countdown timer a constant source of anxiety. 12 minutes remaining. He leaned into a turn, his worn-out tires gripping the road as he shot down a narrow alleyway, a shortcut that shaved a precious minute and a half off the GPS's suggested route. This was the knowledge that separated the good shippers from the great ones, the little secrets, the hidden passages, the rhythm of the traffic lights. It was a skill, a craft, but one no one would ever put on a resume. Today's destination was a gleaming glass tower in District 1, a monument to new money and foreign investment that scraped the sky. As he pulled up to the service entrance, the contrast between his world and theirs was a physical blow. Men in crisp, tailored suits and women in elegant dresses walked through the grand, air-conditioned lobby, their faces serene and untroubled. He, on the other hand, was directed to the back, to a humid, concrete loading bay that smelled of grease and garbage. A stern-faced security guard checked his ID and the order number with a dismissive glance. The guard's uniform was cleaner and better pressed than any item of clothing Alex owned. After getting the all clear, he unstrapped the heavy box, his back muscles protesting the familiar ache. He lugged it to the service elevator, rode it up to the 34th floor, and was met at the apartment door by a maid who took the food without making eye contact, pressing a few crumpled bills into his hand without a word of thanks. The tip was meager. It usually was. The ride down the elevator felt longer. He caught his reflection in the polished steel doors, a thin, tired-looking young man with an earnest face, his hair matted with sweat, his clothes telling a story of hard work and little reward. For a fleeting moment, a wave of bitterness washed over him. He was 22 years old, a university graduate with a degree in logistics management, a fact that felt like a cruel joke every time he strapped on that orange box. While his classmates were starting internships at multinational corporations, sitting in air-conditioned offices and talking about career trajectories, he was burning under the sun, a ghost in the city's great machine. But the bitterness was a luxury he couldn't afford. It didn't pay his rent, a tiny, windowless room in a crowded Bin Than district alley. It didn't send money home to his parents in the countryside, who had sacrificed everything for his education. And it certainly didn't help him save for his dream. So he pushed it down, took a deep breath of the stale elevator air, and forced the corners of his mouth into a semblance of a smile. One more delivery, then another. That's all it was. Later that evening, the oppressive heat finally began to break. Alex sat at a cheap plastic table at a small, open-air cafe, a glass of Café's letter 1EF a da sweating in front of him. The strong, sweet coffee was his one daily indulgence. He was waiting for his friends, Mark and Leo. They had been his closest companions at university, a tight-knit trio who had navigated late-night study sessions and grand pronouncements about their future. Mark arrived first, striding in with an air of unearned confidence. He was wearing a brand-name shirt, crisp and white, and expensive-looking leather shoes that clicked on the pavement. He worked as a junior analyst at his uncle's investment firm, a position he'd secured before he'd even taken his final exams. "Alex, my man," Mark boomed, clapping him on the shoulder a little too hard, still rocking the sun-kissed look. "I see." He gestured vaguely at Alex's tanned arms and face. It wasn't a compliment. Leo shuffled in a moment later, more subdued, a follower in Mark's orbit. He'd landed a respectable, if boring, job in the HR department of a large manufacturing company. "Hey, Alex," he said with a small, slightly apologetic smile. They ordered their drinks, and the conversation quickly turned to their jobs. Mark dominated, as always, complaining about his boss, boasting about a minor report he'd written that had apparently wowed the board, and dropping names of important people he'd supposedly met. Leo chimed in with anecdotes about office politics and the tedious process of screening new hires. Alex listened quietly, stirring the melting ice in his coffee. He felt a chasm opening between them. Their world was one of emails, meetings, performance reviews, and office gossip. His was one of traffic, deadlines, aching muscles, and the silent judgment of security guards. "So, what about you, Alex?" Mark finally asked, turning his attention to him. The question hung in the air, loaded with condescension. "Still playing delivery boy on your little bike? How's the, shipping empire coming along?" he smirked, and Leo let out a nervous chuckle. The casual cruelty of it stung. Alex tried to keep his voice even. "It's a job, Mark. It pays the bills." "Pays the bills?" Mark scoffed, leaning back in his chair as if he were holding court. "Come on, man. We graduated 6 months ago. You have a degree. You were one of the smartest guys in our class. And you're hauling noodle soup around the city? It's embarrassing." "Someone has to do it," Alex said, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, but it doesn't have to be you," Leo piped in, emboldened by Mark's lead. "My company is hiring. They're just administrative assistant roles, but it's a start. It's a real job. In an office. With a future." The phrase "real job" was like a punch to the gut. Was his work not real? Was the sweat on his brow an illusion? Were the thousands of kilometers he'd traveled, the countless packages he'd delivered, the families he'd fed, not a real contribution? "I appreciate that, Leo," Alex said, trying to steer the conversation away from this painful territory. "But I'm okay for now. I'm saving up." Mark leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Saving up for what? A new helmet? Look, Alex, we're your friends. We're telling you this for your own good. You're wasting your potential. People see you out there on that bike with that stupid orange box, and they laugh. They think you're a nobody." And there it was. The truth behind the fake concern. It wasn't about his potential. It was about their own image. They were embarrassed to be associated with him. He was a blemish on their new, upwardly mobile lives. A fire, hot and fierce, began to burn in Alex's chest, eclipsing the earlier bitterness. He looked from Mark's smug face to Leo's weak one. For months, he had been telling himself that this job was just a means to an end, a temporary hardship. But in that moment, he saw it differently. He wasn't just a delivery boy. He was a frontline soldier in a logistical war. And he saw things they couldn't possibly understand from their air-conditioned towers. He saw the inefficiency, the flawed routing algorithms that sent shippers crisscrossing the city unnecessarily, the poor communication between restaurants, shippers, and customers, the lack of proper support for the drivers who were the lifeblood of the entire system. He saw the frustration on the faces of the restaurant owners waiting for pickups and the customers waiting for their food. He saw a system that was cobbled together, fragile and ripe for disruption. He saw a broken system, and where there was brokenness, there was opportunity. Alex took a slow sip of his coffee, the cool liquid doing nothing to quench the fire inside him. He put the glass down on the table with a soft click. "You're right," Alex said, his voice quiet but firm. It wasn't the response they were expecting. Mark and Leo exchanged a confused glance. "You see a delivery boy," Alex continued, looking Mark directly in the eye. And maybe that's all I am right now. But what I see every single day is different. I see a multi-trillion dong industry that's being run by tech companies in Silicon Valley who don't understand this city. They don't understand the traffic, they don't understand the culture, and they don't understand the people doing the actual work. He leaned forward, his voice gaining intensity. You talk about your reports and your meetings. Your world is theoretical. My world is practical. I see the 100 tiny things that go wrong every single day, the things that cost time and money. I see how a better system could work. A system built from the ground up, by people who actually know what it's like to be on the streets. Mark let out a short, sharp laugh. Oh, here we go. Professor Tran and his grand theories. What are you going to do, Alex? Start your own delivery company from your slum apartment? You can't even afford a new phone. He gestured dismissively at the cracked screen of the device on the table. The laughter cut deeper than the insults. It was the sound of disbelief, of utter contempt for his ambition. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on their friendship. Alex stood up. The fire in his chest had now forged into a cold, hard resolve. He was done defending himself. He was done seeking their approval. Maybe I will, he said softly. He pulled a few crumpled bills from his pocket and dropped them on the table, more than enough to cover his coffee. Thanks for the drink and the advice. He turned and walked away, not looking back. He didn't need to see their mocking smiles. He could feel them on his back, like the heat of the afternoon sun. He walked to his bike, his faithful Honda Wave, and swung his leg over the seat. He didn't put on his helmet right away. He just sat there for a moment, the sounds of the city washing over him. The laughter hadn't broken him. It had liberated him. Their scorn was the final push he needed. They saw a nobody, a failure. They had laughed at his job. One day, he vowed, they wouldn't be laughing. He started the engine. The familiar sputter felt different now. It wasn't the sound of a dead-end job anymore. It was the sound of a beginning. He had one last delivery for the night, a late-night snack for a student cramming for exams. As he pulled into the relentless flow of traffic, he felt the weight of the orange box on his back. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a foundation. That night, back in his small, sweltering room, he didn't go straight to sleep. The exhaustion was there, a heavy blanket on his limbs, but his mind was electric. He pulled out a worn notebook and a pen. For months, he had jotted down idle thoughts, frustrations, and small ideas. But tonight was different. He didn't write about the problems. He started designing the solutions. He sketched out a new interface for a driver's app, one that prioritized clarity and simplicity. He designed a dynamic batching system, grouping orders not just by proximity, but by a predictive model of restaurant prep times and traffic flow knowledge he'd gained from thousands of real-world deliveries. He outlined a support system for drivers that offered more than just a faceless call center, including microloans for bike maintenance and partnerships for discounted fuel. He imagined a hyper-local model, with small dispatch hubs in each district to reduce travel times, creating a network that was faster and more resilient. He filled page after page with flowcharts, diagrams, and financial projections based on his own meager earnings. He knew the margins. He knew the costs. He knew the pain points because he lived them. At the top of a fresh page, he wrote a name. He thought about the speed and connection he wanted to build. He wrote down SwiftLink. It sounded strong, modern, efficient. He worked until the first hints of dawn crept into the sky, the city's roar quieting to a distant hum. His back ached and his eyes burned, but he felt a sense of clarity and purpose he hadn't felt in years. The humiliation from the cafe had been transmuted into pure fuel. Mark and Leo's laughter echoed in his mind, but it was no longer a sound of mockery. It was a catalyst. He looked at the notebook, at the blueprint for a future he had just willed into existence. He was still a shipper. He would still wake up in a few hours, pull on his faded polo shirt, and strap the orange box to his bike. But he was no longer just a delivery boy. He was the founder and first employee of SwiftLink Logistics, and his work was just beginning. The 5 years that followed were a blur of relentless, single-minded effort. The mockery from Mark and Leo had not faded. Instead, Alex had packed it down into a dense, high-energy fuel that he burned through 16-hour days. His life became a simple, brutal equation: work, save, plan. For the first year, nothing outwardly changed. He was still Alex the shipper, a familiar face on the streets, the orange box a permanent fixture on his Honda Wave. But inwardly, everything was different. Every delivery was now a data point. Every late order was a case study in inefficiency. Every frustrated customer complaint was a market research survey. He was a spy in his own life, gathering intelligence from the front lines. His tiny, windowless room transformed into the first unofficial headquarters of SwiftLink. The walls were covered with sprawling maps of the city, marked up with colored pens indicating traffic choke points, restaurant clusters, and potential hub locations. Stacks of notebooks overflowed with his analyses, the ink often smudged by sweat and cheap coffee. He lived on instant noodles and banh mi. Every dong saved a brick in the foundation of his dream. He knew he couldn't build the technology alone. He needed an architect for his blueprint. He thought back to his university days, to a quiet, brilliant classmate named N. N was a computer science prodigy, a coder who spoke in algorithms and saw the world in lines of logic. He was socially awkward and perpetually overlooked, always overshadowed by slicker, more charismatic students like Mark. Alex found him working a mind-numbing support job for a mid-sized textile company, his genius relegated to fixing printer jams and resetting passwords. One evening, Alex invited Anne to his room and looked around at the chaotic mess of maps and notes, his expression a mixture of pity and concern. "Alex," he said softly, "are you okay? This is a lot." Alex didn't waste time with pleasantries. He grabbed his primary notebook, the one where he'd first written the name SwiftLink, and spread it open. "I'm more than okay, and I'm onto something," he said, his voice thrumming with an intensity Anne had never seen before. For an hour, Alex walked him through his vision. He didn't talk like a dreamer. He talked like an engineer. He spoke of dynamic batching protocols, predictive EDAs based on real-time traffic analysis, and a tiered driver support system. He spoke Anne's language. "The big apps, they're blunt instruments," Alex explained, jabbing a finger at a map. "They treat Saigon like it's San Francisco. They don't understand the alleyways, the pop-up markets, the way a sudden downpour can shut down a whole district. We can build something smarter, something faster, something from the ground up." Anne was silent for a long time, flipping through the notebooks. He saw the depth of the research, the obsessive attention to detail. He saw a logistics system designed not by a committee in a boardroom, but by a soldier in the trenches. "The server costs alone will be huge," Anne said, his practical mind already identifying obstacles. "And the app development, this is a massive undertaking." "We start small," Alex countered. "One district. Binthan. We prove the model. I've got savings. Not much, but enough for the initial server space and to pay a couple of drivers a guaranteed wage. I'll be driver number 1. You and me, and we build it at night. We prove it works." And looked at Alex, at the fire in his eyes. He saw the same hunger for recognition, the same frustration of being underestimated that he felt himself. In Alex's obsessive vision, he saw a chance to finally build something that mattered. "Okay," Anne said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Let's build it." The next 2 years were the hardest of Alex's life. He and Anne became nocturnal creatures. Alex would work his shipping job from dawn until dusk, then meet Anne at the tiny room that was now their shared office. Fueled by coffee and a shared sense of purpose, they would work until 3 or 4 a.m. and hunched over his second-hand laptop, turning Alex's diagrams and flowcharts into clean, elegant code, while Alex refined the business model and recruited their first team. he didn't recruit from job boards. He recruited from the streets. He approached the other shippers he saw every day, the ones with the tired eyes and the hustler's spirit. He offered them something the big companies never did: respect, a slightly higher cut, and a voice. He promised them a system built for them. 3 drivers, old veterans of the road, took a chance on him. They launched SwiftLink with a whisper, not a bang. Their first clients were a handful of small restaurants and street food vendors in Bin Than district, whose owners Alex had befriended on his routes. Their first office was a tiny, rented storefront, barely big enough for a desk, a whiteboard, and a small cot in the back where Alex and Anne would take turns sleeping. For the first 6 months, it was a desperate struggle. Every day felt like they were one bad debt or one server crash away from oblivion. The turning point came during the chaos of the T-1 EBFT holiday. As the city descended into a frantic rush of gift-giving and feasting, the larger delivery platforms buckled under the strain. Their systems crashed, orders were lost, and drivers were overwhelmed. But SwiftLink, with its hyper-local focus and highly motivated team, held strong. Their small, agile system was built for the city's unique rhythms. While their competitors were melting down, SwiftLink was delivering reliably, quickly. Word of mouth spread like wildfire through the restaurant community. "Their system just works," became the common refrain. Small business owners, fed up with the faceless Goliaths, began to switch over. That T-1 EBFT, they didn't just survive, they tripled their order volume. The success brought them to the attention of a small, local angel investor, the owner of a successful chain of bakeries, who had been one of their first and most impressed clients. He saw in Alex not a reckless kid, but a sharp, focused operator who understood the market in his bones. The first seed investment felt like an ocean of capital. It allowed them to move into a real office, hire more developers and support staff, and expand their driver network. From there, SwiftLink's growth was explosive. They expanded from Bin Than to cover the entire city. They diversified from food delivery into e-commerce fulfillment and corporate courier services. Alex, the shipper, was slowly, almost imperceptibly, replaced by Alex Tran, the CEO. The faded polo shirt was replaced by a smart, well-fitting button-down. The battered Honda Wave was replaced by a modest but clean company car. He never lost touch with the streets, however. He made it a point to spend at least one day a month in the operations center, listening to driver dispatch calls. Once a quarter, he would anonymously order from his own service, just to experience it as a customer. The memory of the weight of that orange box was a permanent part of his psyche. It was his North Star, reminding him of the mission, to build a logistics company with a human core. 5 years to the day after that humiliating evening at the cafe, Alex stood in his office. It was on the 34th floor of a gleaming glass tower in District 1, the very same building he used to deliver food to. The view was breathtaking. The entire city sprawled beneath him, a vibrant, sprawling tapestry of life. He could see the serpentine lines of traffic, the swarm of motorbikes flowing like blood cells through the city's arteries. Among them, he knew, were thousands of drivers in SwiftLink's bright blue uniforms, the spiritual successors to his orange box. His intercom buzzed. It was his executive assistant. "Mr. Tran, the final candidate for the senior HR manager position is here. The team has given him their unanimous recommendation. Would you like to sit in for the final sign-off?" "Yes, send him in," Alex said, turning away from the window and taking a seat behind his large, minimalist desk. The door opened, and a man in a slightly ill-fitting suit walked in. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the expensive office before settling on Alex. His face was heavier, the lines of stress and disappointment etched around his mouth, but he was instantly recognizable. It was Leo. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Alex saw a flash of their shared past, late-night study sessions, cheap beer, the cafe, the smug laughter. Leo's eyes widened in shock as recognition dawned. His face paled. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Alex, Leo stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. Is that you? Alex remained calm, his expression neutral. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Leo, it's been a long time. Please, have a seat. Leo stumbled into the chair, looking utterly bewildered. I didn't know. The company, SwiftLink, I had no idea you were. His voice trailed off. The founder and CEO? Yes, Alex finished for him, his tone even and professional. I've reviewed your resume and the team's notes. Your experience at your previous company is impressive. You managed a team of 15 and handled recruitment for their entire southern division. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. He wasn't going to mention their last conversation. He wasn't going to bring up the mockery or the insults. His success was a louder statement than any words he could utter. But he had to ask one question. Tell me, Leo, Alex said, his gaze steady and piercing. In your experience, what is the most important asset to a logistics company like ours? Leo, still flustered, gave a textbook HR answer. Well, an efficient supply chain, robust technology, a strong brand identity. No, Alex said, cutting him off gently. It's the people. Specifically, the drivers. They are not contractors. They are not partners. They are the foundation of this entire enterprise. Everything we do, every line of code we write, every operational decision we make, must be to support them. Do you understand that? Leo looked at Alex at the confidence, the quiet authority, the complete transformation from the sweaty, downtrodden shipper he had once mocked. He saw the truth in Alex's words, a philosophy born from hard-won experience. The shame was palpable on his face. Yes, Leo said, his voice now clear and sincere. Yes, I understand. Alex nodded slowly. Good. The team believes you're the right person for this role. I'm inclined to agree. Welcome to SwiftLink. Leo sat there, stunned into silence, a mix of relief, disbelief, and profound regret washing over him. Later that week, as Alex was walking through the lobby toward the elevators, he saw another familiar figure standing near the reception desk. He was thinner, his expensive clothes replaced by a cheap, off-the-rack suit that hung loosely on his frame. He was clutching a resume and looking around with an air of desperation. It was Mark. Their eyes met across the polished marble floor. For a fleeting second, Alex saw it all again, Mark's sneering face, the contemptuous laughter. But the fire of anger was long gone, replaced by something colder, more distant. Pity. Mark's face went through a rapid series of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and finally, a deep, humiliating recognition. He looked down at the resume in his hands, then back up at Alex, the picture of success walking toward the executive elevators. Mark had applied for a junior-level account executive position. He was just another number in a pile of hundreds of applications. Alex didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He simply gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture not of greeting, but of acknowledgement. Then he turned and stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut, leaving Mark standing alone in the grand lobby of the company built by the man he once laughed at. As the elevator ascended, Alex looked out through the glass wall. He saw the city lights beginning to glitter as dusk fell. He saw the endless river of motorbikes, a constellation of moving headlights. He was no longer one of them, but he would always be a part of them. The laughter that had once been his torment was now just a faint, distant echo, a footnote in the first chapter of a story that was still being written. The weight of the box was a memory, but its lesson was the core of his empire.